In the webinar.
Okay, today is Thursday, July 1st, and it is 5:03 p.m. and I'm calling the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Let's start with a roll call. I am Greg Huxema, Shannon Greina.
Here.
John Krasick.
Here.
Tom Brown.
Here.
Bob Soltis.
Here.
And with the city staff, we have Kim Mahoney and
Here.
Carl Demas
Here.
and Michelle Thomas. And then when Larry joins in, I'll interrupt you, Carl, just for the record to make note when he joins the meeting. So I apologize in advance for interrupting. Okay, first item is approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
So move.
Any second?
Volume 48%.
Second.
Is there any discussion or corrections? Barring none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes say aye.
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 Motion
Aye.
passes unanimously. Okay. Well, we only have one item on tonight's agenda, but it's a big one. So we're launching into or jumping into the deep end of the pool here. So without further ado, as they say, Carl, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, and if I could just make one quick announcement so that I don't forget at the end of the meeting before we start on this, that just wanted to remind the board that we have some vacancies on the design review board, and I know that a couple of commissioners have applied. And just wanted to put that out to the rest of the commission as well, and make sure that you all remember that opportunity is available. The design review board allows for one planning commission member to sit on the design review board, but there could be a possibility for multiple planning commissioners to sit on the design review board if they've met the qualifications for one of the other slots or the other criteria that are required to make up the board. So Katrina asked that I just remind everyone that the opportunity is available still. And sorry, go ahead, Chair.
I just wanted to, if everyone could please mute their microphones, we're getting some feedback somewhere.
Just going to say the same thing. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so first let me start really quick with just looking at this memo that I sent around as part of the packet for this evening. And I decided not to put together a real detailed memo for the meeting specific to this meeting, since most of what we're covering here was really sort of introduced back in March 18th, 2021. So I provided Planning Commission with the packet from that meeting that contained all of the documentation for the full breadth of this periodic review, and it contained all of the background information that sort of led from when this thing started back in 2018 up to this point now here in 2021. So we're pushing into about 3 years into this process of this periodic review, which is not uncommon and not unheard of by any means. I mean, we have to consider that the 2013 Shoreline Master Program that we're amending now was adopted in December of 2013, but that process to amend the former Shoreline Master Program, which was adopted in 1994, actually began in 2008. So that was over a 5-year or around a 5-year process to adopt the original master program. So anyway, we're right where we should be, I guess is what I'm saying. And so what I wanted to do with this memo is provide just kind of a tentative idea for a schedule, and hopefully we can keep to it. And that, I know a lot of that really depends upon me and Kim and our consultant Gretty kind of really getting the work done and hitting our deadlines in order to get this thing back to you. And so we have this first date, which is today. And I had provided the checklist and the chapters that have been amended. And what I didn't put in this note, and maybe that's because it was an afterthought, is that I felt like this meeting really should be focused upon those items that were proposed by the city of Gig Harbor, and not so much focus on the items that are really state mandated updates in that checklist. So and I'll open that up to discussion maybe at some point here when we get started, to just to maybe hear from the Planning Commission about your thoughts on, if that approach makes sense or not. And I can always adjust at the next meeting if the Planning Commission would like me to dive into more detail and or really where those other amendments are located in the amended chapters of the SMP. So this schedule is a little aggressive in that we're trying to get to another meeting bring the SMP back to you on July 15th in a couple of weeks with further changes that we're currently working on with Gretty and Associates, and largely based on the recent meeting we had with FEMA that I relayed to you at our last meeting. I'm hopeful that we can get it done. I'll know more here in shortly after the holiday weekend, so I can firm that up a little bit more. We still have to issue SEPA, our threshold determination, on this amendment. And then we do have another date kind of built in here on August 5th if we needed to. That's another regular meeting of the Planning Commission. So that could be a possibility if we feel like we need more time. This feels like it's a little bit rushed. We could fall back on that date. The ultimate goal here is really to get this thing to council in September. And I'll say that part of the impetus for trying to get it there in September is that the shoreline planner that we're working with at the Department of Ecology, who actually was instrumental in putting together our shoreline master program, the current 2013 version, is planning, and she's working with us now on this amendment, is planning to retire very soon. She already had planned to retire. She had to put her retirement plans on hold for various reasons, so we're lucky for that. But it would not benefit the city, I guess, if we had to start over with a new shoreline planner at the Department of Ecology. So Kim Van Zwallenberg has intimate knowledge of our shoreline program, and has been really great to work with. So it'd be good if we can get this through and done while she's still working for Ecology. So that I just wanted to give some background on why the schedule is what it is. And maybe, Chair, this is a good time to open that up to questions if anybody has any about schedule or timing or concerns that I should hear.
Sure.
If any, and if none, great.
What you referred to additional amendments. Where would additional amendments come from at this point?
Oh, that's a great question, Commissioner Brown. Thank you. So in the checklist, and more in particular, the checklist that I sent this afternoon that has the green and yellow highlights in it, the yellow highlighted cells or rows are revisions that are still not fully baked, and we're still working on with Gretty. We're still studying those, and they're mostly related to amendments that need to be made to the critical areas, our critical areas ordinance, and our floodplain development ordinance, which all kind of comes back to that sticky wicket we've been dealing with FEMA, and trying to find some consistency between their regulations, Ecology's requirements, and the city's own desires So those would be the amendments that I was speaking of there, Commissioner Brown. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So if there's no other questions then on that, I will move into the PowerPoint presentation that I prepared here for you all. Let me open that up. And we'll see how this works. Let me know if this doesn't look right on your end, because I've had some issues in the past. Does that look okay? Are you all looking at a cover page, Shoreline Master Program Periodic Review Proposed City of Gig Harbor Revisions?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Oops. And so that's exactly what this is. Like I had said in the when I was introducing the memo, I decided to focus on those proposed City of Gig Harbor revisions that are found in the checklist under the 2018 row. And the reason I'm focusing on those, as I stated before, is that the rest of the checklist is really, all of those amendments are really items that ecology, that are relative to laws that have changed in the period since we adopted our first Shoreline Master Program, and actually even before that. And like I said, so we started the process in 2008. Ecology, the state had changed the rules, made a major amendment to the Shoreline Master, to the Act back in 2003, that sort of precipitated all these changes to jurisdictions' master programs. We got started on ours in around 2008. And so there are amendments then, this is sort of our first amendment to that major overhaul that took place across the state. And so these amendments that ecology is mandating right now go back to 2007. So it's kind of a long and convoluted trail, but here we are, hopefully just about done. So the first item on the list was an amendment that really is more about clarification for a complete application. So really, this is something that I believe was brought to bear on the amendment process by GREDI, actually, who deals a lot with the review of our shoreline applications. And so in WAC 173-27-180, there's a list of requirements for a complete application for any shoreline permit. So that would be substantial development, conditional use, a variance permit, a formal exemption. And we didn't have anything that really laid that out concretely in the program. So this is really, a lot of these really are just clarifying revisions. And so that makes it maybe a little bit simpler, at least with this first round that we're looking at today. Chair, I didn't address this, but do you want to stop on each one and see if commissioners have any questions or comments? There's about 18 or so slides here, so it might be good to just take it slide by slide and get questions along the way.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Carl. I agree with that.
And I'd like to remind Commissioner Solstice that if he would like to raise his hand to ask a question, he can push *9.
Thanks, Michelle.
Since he's on the phone.
I wouldn't expect many questions on this one, but it'd be worth opening up the.
Right, let's roll
Okay.
on.
All right, moving on. Oh, and I should also say, hopefully my email made sense this afternoon. The changes that I made to the checklist that included enumerating those items under the 2018 section. They were not enumerated before, and so that was a little confusing to try and find some way to reference them. So I enumerated them. And so each of these slides then, as the title states, relates back to that checklist that hopefully you all have up in front of you. So you know which one we're referring to here. Okay, so the second one is item B under the 2018 section. And this is relative to liveaboards. Again, this is kind of adding some clarity to the program where liveaboard regulations weren't really, how should I say, they weren't really tied back to the requirements section. So we just added some language here that that would provide some consistency and clarity for where and when liveaboard vessels are allowed.
Carl, this may sound crazy, but suppose somebody decided to run a business out of a liveaboard within a marina.
So sort of a home occupation.
Yeah, it could be a home occupation.
It's not a crazy question, John. It actually is happening.
Yeah. Are you talking about the so-called flotels in that way?
Yes, actually.
Mm-hmm. Kim Mahoney, have any thoughts on that?
I would say that at that point, it's not a residential liveaboard. I'd say at that point, it's a commercial operation. It would be subject to those provisions of the SMP. That's my immediate thought.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think that it wouldn't necessarily fall under this live aboard vessel definition. So it would be a different use and regulated differently. And we are aware, and the Department of Natural Resources is also aware that a lot of that's happening. And I think there's, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but I think there's some conversations going on around that subject at the state level anyway.
There might be. I'm not aware of any, but there very well may be.
So again, this is another one that's just sort of a point of clarity here. Does anybody have any questions about this one? I wouldn't imagine that there probably are too many questions relative to the actual language.
Not really, but just to clarify what my comment that there, I'm aware of at least two spots at marinas. Like there's a set of, they actually are houseboats, I believe, at one of the marinas that are rented. I don't know that, like if they're long-term or just nightly. And then there are 2 yachts down at the Gig Harbor Marina that they do like an Airbnb type of rental on those yachts.
Yeah, it's, the conversation gets stickier and stickier. We're kind of dealing with that on the upland side of things currently, with short-term versus long-term rentals and how those are defined. And so, in this case, it would sort of probably be quite similar in that if the live-aboard vessel is allowed within a marina and it is rented out, I don't know that we, and Kim, jump in if I misspeak here because I don't want to get this wrong, but I don't believe that we would regulate it any differently necessarily unless it were rented room by room as sort of a lodging level 1, I think. And we haven't really had that discussion in depth where it comes to liveaboards in marinas. And so I'm speaking a little off the cuff here. But that's kind of how we're looking at things on the upland side, although that's up to some legal interpretation at the moment. And, Kim, this is a really good point, and maybe something that we should kind of bring to bear in that discussion that we're currently having with our legal department, and just say, hey, we've also got this issue that's very similar, and we also don't have a good way of differentiating between short-term and long-term rental. You know, should we be regulating a houseboat or a liveaboard vessel that is rented, but is still a liveaboard vessel? For, you know, it still meets that definition. You know, they're not renting it out piecemeal, so to speak, as like a lodging sort of use. Or because it's a liveaboard vessel, does it have to be looked at differently? You know, the Airbnb phenomena has really thrown a lot of municipalities kind of sideways, and a lot of municipalities are now coming out with, you know, short-term rental ordinances to address these things specifically and treat them as something different, a different use. And so I would imagine that that'll be coming down the pike on liveaboards as well, because we're going to have to address it in a similar fashion. So, Chair, the point is well taken, and Commissioner Krawczyk, it's definitely well taken, and we will note that in our discussions with the Airbnb and short-term, long-term rentals we're having otherwise. And I will say that that's probably something that is likely coming to the Planning Commission in the not too distant future. Okay, I'm going to move along then. So this amendment is this one's a little bit complicated, but the amendment was originally looking to eliminate a prohibition on water-related and water enjoyment uses, waterward of ordinary high water mark, in existing structures only. So in other words, we were looking to allow those types of uses in new structures as well. But after some review and feedback from both Ecology and the Planning Commission, this amendment was changed to be only conditionally allow water-related and water enjoyment uses on deck structures, waterward of ordinary high water mark. So these uses would only be allowed on new deck structures that are built waterward of ordinary high water mark, so you can imagine a deck that's sort of cantilevered out over the water, in other words, and that's being used for water enjoyment or recreational type use of some sort. And so as part of that amendment, and there's two parts to this, we made a change to the commercial uses section, which is a matrix essentially, table, and we changed the designation, or added a designation of conditional use for water-related and water enjoyment uses on deck structures located waterward of ordinary high water mark. And before I open this up to some questions, I'm going to move on to the next slide because it furthers this, where we added some, and actually the next two slides, where we added some regulations around this idea. So this regulation would be found under our commercial uses section in the regulations subsection, and it would add the red language here that would state that commercial use and development, including deck structures located waterward of the ordinary high water mark that are appurtenant to permitted upland water-related and water enjoyment uses, shall be allowed, so on and so forth with the rest of the language. And then we also added a new section to the commercial use, a new subsection, excuse me, to the commercial uses section to add further regulations around this idea. And it provides some clarity and definition as to how those decks could be constructed. And so it includes things like the cantilever design needing piling support or without the need for piling support. So in other words, you'd be building a deck structure that would not have any impact on the shoreline directly. Includes some size limitations And it even goes as far as to include some prohibition on the storage of tables, chairs, or other materials. So this revision has been vetted with the Department of Ecology, at least to this point. Of course, it will need to be further reviewed by them. But as far as I am aware, the Department of Ecology is largely, or I should say generally, supportive of the drafted language that I've shown you here. So with that, I think I'll open this one up to any questions anybody has, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I will find answers and get back to you. And maybe there are no questions.
I have a question. So is the point behind this that if it's cantilevered over, that there's nothing stored there that's exceptionally heavy that would potentially cause it to fail? I mean, is that the point?
Actually, the point of not storing anything on it is to ensure that the deck doesn't create a solid cover over the water.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So ideally, you would have gaps in the, and I can't remember, does it actually say anything about the decking? Generally, there are requirements for overwater decking in how, and it's based on a percentage. And Kim, I can't remember. Do you remember what the percentage is right off the top of your head? I can't think of it right now, but there are requirements for overwater decking and how much grading they have to include. And so this is the idea here, is that we don't want somebody to be able to come in and build a deck and then store all kinds of stuff all over it, creating that additional overwater coverage.
Okay. That helps a lot. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to move on. Okay, so this amendment or revision is relative, and again, this one's in multiple parts and actually covers items D and J under 2018 because they're both related to parking. And the language is a little unclear in our summary of change. Unfortunately, I think it got a little convoluted when this was all drafted up, and I didn't want to make changes to it just because we've had this document for a long time now, and I don't want to confuse things. So I tried my best here to sort of clear it up. But the idea behind this revision is to conditionally allow principal use parking in the city waterfront shoreline environmental designation, and then create some regulation around it. Right now, parking as a principal use is prohibited in all shoreline environmental designations. And I'll give you the definition. Principal use parking is parking which is the principal use on the property and is not accessory to another use. So in other words, it would just be a property that would be used for parking only. That would be the primary use, in other words. And so in making this amendment or revision, there were several places in the Shoreline Master Program that needed changes. The first of which is this one, section 7.20.2 in the policies section of the parking, the transportation facilities chapter of the Shoreline Master Program. And so what we've done here is to say that parking as a principal use rather than just a use should only be allowed in limited circumstances and only when separated from the shoreline area by an arterial street. So in other words, we would only allow something like this if it were upland of of the shoreline. And so an arterial street would have to bifurcate or create a sort of a barrier between the shoreline and that parking area. And we further define that here in the next slide, where we've actually added in specifically where a principal use parking or principal parking use would be allowed. And so so we start out with the principal use would be prohibited in the shoreline jurisdiction, except in those portions of the city waterfront shoreline environmental designation. So only in the city waterfront, located landward of Harborview Drive and North Harborview Drive. So sort of in that, our sort of downtown view basin area, but only upland of Harborview Drive and North Harborview Drive. Further, where off-street parking is allowed, best management practices that include low impact development techniques shall be employed in the design and operation of off-street parking areas, consistent with the requirements for 14.20, which is chapter found in the Gig Harbor Municipal Code for stormwater management. And then we also made a change to the use matrix to allow it as a conditional use in the city waterfront environmental designation. And then we made one more change to the parking regulations, which is pretty much the same language that I read previously, that would allow this as the principal use is prohibited except when, and then the same language here. So I'll open that up to discussion. Okay, guess I'm going to keep moving here. If anybody has a question later about any of these, or if something comes up, please, feel free. I can go back real easily. This next amendment is really to fix a bad reference. Oh, actually, I should say, so I skipped item E. You'll notice I went from D straight to F. Item E is one of those that's under review currently by staff and GREDI. And that one is directly relative to the FEMA Special Flood Hazard Regulations update. And so I am very hopeful that I'll be able to bring that back at the next Planning Commission meeting with some language around it and some amendments to consider. This one is just a fix on a bad reference. We had it pointing to regulation number 2. And it really needed to point to regulation number 3. Regulation number 3 says that an applicant may not need to provide public access where one or more of the following conditions apply. And condition number 2, it didn't make any sense. So another just kind of point of clarity. This is another one. Actually, and note that we skipped from F to I here as well. And G through H are still under review. Those items are relative to the city's critical areas ordinance and need to be updated consistent with that chapter. If we, and this is another question that we're still kind of working through as to whether or not we actually want to make those amendments now, or if we should wait and make those amendments in the critical areas ordinance first, and then reflect them in the shoreline master program through another amendment. So we're still kind of working through that process, or if they should all just be done concurrently. This revision here under I clarifies that the vegetation conservation strip should apply to both uses and structures on the site, whereas before it was kind of ambiguous as to how we should apply it. And so this clarifies that so that there's no question that the VCS should apply to pretty much any form of use or development that takes place within the shoreline jurisdiction. Have any questions on any of that or the previous one? They're largely straightforward, I guess. So the next few are changes to definitions. This first one, we had kind of an improper spelling of shoreline when we were talking about the Shoreline Management Act of 1971. We had it stated as shorelines rather than shoreline. And so we just needed to make that revision. It's just a grammatical error, really. But what we decided to do was just call it the act rather than actually stating Shoreline Management Act and spelling it all out. And we do have a definition of act in the Shoreline Master Program already, which states the act means the Washington State Shoreline Management Act, SMA of 1971, as amended, Chapter 90.58 RCW. So this again just kind of cleans things up a little bit here. The next one is relative to our definition for utilities. The former definition did not include stormwater. So we've added stormwater to that definition, again, for better clarity, better consistency. The next change was adding, we didn't have a definition of navigational aids in our Shoreline Master Program, if you can believe it. And that's come up a few times where we have an anchor buoy going out or a channel marker or something, and we don't have any definition around it. So we just felt like it was a good opportunity to get that definition in. And I can't remember where this definition came from exactly, but I am imagining that it was fairly verbatim from some state code.
Carl, what
Yes.
is a dolphin?
Orange buoys or dolphins, Kim? All the time.
Yes.
I'm going to throw Kim under the bus on.
No, it's okay. It's not the animal. Michelle, can you give me the sharing privileges here?
Oh, here.
You already have him as a panelist.
Oh, do I? Okay.
Reader, Zoom 876.
Sorry, everybody. Yes. Refamiliarize.
Easier to see a picture of than to explain.
It is a man-made semi-submerged maritime structure usually installed to provide a fixed structure for temporary mooring to prevent ships from drifting to shallow water or to serve as a base for navigational aids.
Yeah, if everybody can see the picture right here, this is what a dolphin is.
Oh, so those are what you see when you're like we're at the ferry landings and things, or where they're
Right.
primarily used. Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
maybe
thanks.
we should. Do we define dolphin?
I just wrote that down.
Maybe an opportunity. Not
Because
the
it's a great
bottlenose
question.
kind.
That's a great question. I didn't even actually pick up on it when I've read this definition probably 50 times and didn't know what a dolphin was. Or maybe I answered that question at some point and forgot. That's a great question, though. I think maybe we should look at that. Any other questions? Oh, here, let me go back to my share here. Any other questions from any other commissioners on this one? I think that's pretty straightforward. This next one's fairly straightforward as well. Oops. There we go. So we have this dollar amount that we use. It's really used to determine if a development proposal within the shoreline jurisdiction is exempt from a substantial development permit. And that is found in the requirements of section 8.2.2 of the Shoreline Master Program. And so this dollar amount, if a development proposal exceeds this dollar amount, then it needs a shoreline substantial development permit if it doesn't meet any of the other exemptions that are laid out in 8.2.2. So it's kind of it's a bit of a catch-all exemption but just for shoreline substantial development. And so this dollar amount is adjusted for inflation every 5 years by the Office of Financial Management based on changes in the consumer price index during that time period. And so oddly, or funny, I suppose, enough, we're probably going to need to adjust this again in 2 years, I think, is what I calculated, because it started back in 2007 when they began adjusting this up. So it used to be $6,416. Now it's $7,047. And like I said, it'll be adjusted again. Now we've been applying the $7,040. We're required by law to apply the $7,047 as soon as the Office of Financial Management releases that figure. So we'll do that again. But we were all looking forward to having this sort of published in our shoreline master programs rather than everybody's got the chicken scratch and the margin right now with the dollar figure. We'll all be back to that here again soon.
Carl, would it be better off to have language in there that's references what the state says it is rather than a specific dollar amount?
It's actually a very, very good idea. I hadn't considered that. I will talk to Ecology about that and find out if this is a requirement that we have this number in our master program. But that would make good sense. And then we just have to kind of, as reviewers, it's nice because we have it right there. But like I was just describing, if it's going to change every 5 years anyway, we still have to know what the number is. So I think it's a great suggestion. I will run that up the flagpole with Ecology and find out if we can make that change.
Carl, I'm actually in favor of having the number in there. And I appreciate John's point because it does change, but I was on the customer end of this, and it was nice to be able to look up the thing and know exactly what the number was without bugging anybody at City Hall. But I think part of the issue for me with this is the language of this section is really awkward. Because you have or, which might be better read as $7,047 with subsequent adjustments by the State Office of Financial Management, and that would be a parenthetic remark. Because then you have another or, and those two ors don't have anything to do with each other, so it reads very awkwardly. So I would say put that with subsequent adjustments by the State Office of Financial Management, or with the every 5. I mean, you can be specific about it with the every 5-year adjustments, by State Office of Financial Management as a parenthetic remark. Or any development, and then it's just an awkward sentence because even that everything that's after that last or is still
related back to development.
Yeah, it goes way back there. So I think I need to.
Yeah. I see where you're going with that. I think that's a really good point. It is a really awkward definition the way it's written. So how do we want to?
4.5.
How do you want me to proceed, Chair? Do you want to poll other commissioners here to kind of decide how everybody feels about having the dollar amount in or out? I think either way, the definition needs to be rewritten. I think that's a great suggestion, and we can certainly work on some some language around that and bring it back at the next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, what the rest of y'all think?
I agree that it seems helpful to have the actual dollar amount in there again, so somebody doesn't have to, try to do that. And I also agree that the language is confusing, and so it clarificate. So my vote would be keep the dollar amount and a revision of the rest of that paragraph.
Webinar.
Any other thoughts on that? Sounds like maybe. So maybe we'll come back, Chair, with some language, or maybe even a couple options around this at the next meeting for consideration.
Commissioner Solstice is unmuted. He has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say I agree with the dollar amount being in there rather than being sent to another place. And I can't actually see the wording, but if it looks like it's confusing to several members of the commission, it probably needs some rework, Carl.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Carl, maybe you could, if it read, substantial development shall mean any development of which a total cost or fair market value exceeds $7,047, or any development which material interferes with the normal public use of the water or shorelines of the state. And perhaps you could put an asterisk after that dollar figure, and then just put an asterisk down there with a footnote that says, this number is adjusted every 5 years by the State Office of Financial Management.
Yeah, using a footnote's I think that's a great solution.
I agree,
think
Greg.
that would be most clear, I think.
Okay, we'll take a crack at that and bring that back for consideration at the next meeting. But I really like the suggestion. Okay. Anything else on that one then? That's great. That's nice. That's a great improvement. Okay, I'll move on to the next definition. This is another new definition in Chapter 2, definition of a harbor area, which is also kind of strange that we didn't have a definition of this in our Shoreline Master Program, given that we are one of, I think it's 20 or 24 harbor areas in the state. I had that up here. 27 is what the actual number is. Harbor areas in the state that are actually defined in our state's constitution. And so we added this definition. I would say the definition doesn't help a whole bunch necessarily, but at least provides some idea of what a harbor area is. Now, we don't talk much about harbor areas in the Shoreline Master Program, but it is something that we deal with mostly with the outer and inner harbor lines that define the harbor area, and really relative mostly to the outer harbor line, whereby a dock or a float or a pier are not allowed to exceed beyond. And I could show you actually, I actually pulled this up so I could show you our harbor area. Stop that share. And Kim, jump in on this too if you have any thoughts or want to add anything to what I'm trying to say here. So I had this is our our GIS map. Can everybody see the map okay?
Yes.
So the yellow line is our inner harbor line. Around the harbor, ends here, wraps up just kind of just up here, and the outer harbor line is the green line. And that green line is the one that we use mostly when we're doing development review in the shoreline. And, you know, we're looking to ensure that a proposal is not exceeding that line and getting out into these, you know, the navigable waters beyond. So, and so this definition is just meant to kind of fill that gap, describe something that we have and we use, but didn't really have any definition around. Okay.
Zoom weapon.
All right. So moving on to the next one here. This is actually the last one. I note I skipped item P on the list. Item P was determined to be not applicable because this was an idea to include first-class tidelands and second-class tidelands and tideland definitions, but we found that it was not used. None of those terms are really used in the Shoreline Master Program, and so based on some feedback from ecology, we decided to not include definitions around them, just to keep the master program really slimmed down to however, you know, 300 and some pages it is, I think. So moving on to Q. This is another sort of point of clarity to add some additional criterion for utility conveyance systems. And this is really relative to stormwater outfalls. And so we have a list of these conveyance facilities under 7.21.2, which is our definition section for the utilities section, or definitions subsection for the utilities section. And so we added this item D, the conveyance facilities, including discharge outlets, shall be designed consistently with the city's stormwater manual. So again, pointing back to chapter 14.20, which we've done a couple times now in these sections, or in these amendments, excuse me. Any questions around that one?
Are there any other conveyance facilities beside discharge outlets?
Well, there's conveyance facilities, but where we deal with them in the shoreline generally is where they discharge into the bay. I can't think of any other. I suppose we have sewer conveyance, but that is also, I think that's also defined in, let me pull up that section really quick here. We can just look at it. I think it's a good question.
Could also, Carl, just be conveyance down to a dissipator.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the conveyance has to pass through the shoreline jurisdiction, I guess, to get to the outlet or discharge outlet or dissipator or whatever the case may be. Let me pull this up and see what else is in this definition, just so we're all aware.
And Carl, I can't see all of D there. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, but after stormwater, it's cut off.
Okay, it says stormwater manual, and then it provides a reference to chapter 1420 of the Gig Harbor Municipal Code. So let me stop this share and open up 7.2.1. Where are you? Okay, so here's 7.21.2. Oh, definitions. Oh, that's why I thought that was weird that it said definitions. It's supposed to be regulations. I apologize. That's a typo there, and I didn't change the page number either. So, but scrolling down, so here are so conveyance facilities include stormwater, wastewater, or water supply, pump stations, and stormwater discharge facilities such as dispersion trenches, level spreaders, and outfalls may be located in the shoreline jurisdiction on a case-by-case basis when the administrator determines that all of the following are met. And then these are the regulations around when we can put those or allow those conveyance facilities within the shoreline jurisdiction. So in answer to your question, Commissioner Brown, I think we lay out what other conveyance facilities these regulations are relative to within the earlier in the subsection.
Thank you.
So any other questions around that one? I guess that one, all of these are fairly straightforward, I guess. But I appreciate you all listening to me ramble on about them. Let me stop this share then. Go back. PowerPoint. And I think that was the last one. Yeah, that was the last one. So Chair, I'll turn this back over to you at this point for any other discussion around this topic. And what I'd really appreciate, if it's possible, is to get some idea of whether this was a good way to present this material to commissioners, or if there might be a better way to go through these. This was the best way I could think of to do it, given that the amendments are sort of spread throughout the chapters of the Shoreline Master Program. I just thought that this would be a good way to kind of go through it. And also given that we have the checklist to use as sort of our guidance. And then I'll say that, hope that what we're hoping for at the next meeting is to bring back those items that are highlighted in yellow on that checklist with either some language around them or an explanation as to why they shouldn't move forward. Also, we will make a change to that the definition of substantial development and bring that back for your review, as well as maybe consider adding a definition around a dolphin.
Carl, I thought your method of dealing with this today was excellent. I found it very clear. It's very hard to go through long pages of text. They're looking for the specific changes. So this is a whole lot better.
Thank you.
Carl, if it's appropriate at this time, could you say a few words about pulling together the public participation plan for this update?
So the public participation plan for this update will be and is being conducted now through the Planning Commission process, so through the legislative process. And we will hold a public hearing here with the commission before taking any recommendation to the City Council. This would be approved by council through an ordinance. And so there would be opportunity for the public to be involved there as well once we get to council. they could adopt upon, at first reading. I would guess likely they will not on something as large and complicated as these amendments. I would guess that they'll want an extra meeting to kind of chew on it, maybe make a couple of changes and bring it back for second reading. So there would likely be 2 meetings at the council level. And then we're not going through the same process that we went through with the Shoreline Master Program art amendment, which was an optional process that we went through that sort of included an earlier joint public comment period. This one will go through the regular process whereby ecology will hold another comment period after the city council approves the changes to the Shoreline Master Program. So we would put together our package and send it over to ecology for review, and they would hold an additional 30-day public comment period at that point. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for public to participate in this process.
How will you convey the essence of this or publish this so that the public can kind of grasp this very complex and detailed subject? I mean, I guess I'm more interested in how to communicate to the public what's going on here and invite them to make comments if they feel moved to do so.
I think it's a really great point, Commissioner Brown, and definitely something that we need to consider. We've been using this this checklist that ecology provides throughout this process, and keeping things in these columns of summary of change, and then what sections we're reviewing for that change, and then what action we've taken in the final column. And so in answer to your question, I think I would want to try and keep maybe with some format, just to kind of keep the consistency going from the beginning of this process to the end. And so what I would suggest is either an additional column that has the actual changes made in it, and or maybe using the action column and updating it. Right now, we've just been kind of trying to keep things rolling in here, and that's why there's some inconsistencies in some of the columns and some of the rows, just because we're using this as sort of a living and working document. But maybe in the final document, it's a cleaned up version of this checklist that sort of lays it out concisely, from summary of change to review to the actual change verbatim. That would be that's what I'm thinking right now, but I'm certainly open to suggestions if the Planning Commission has some. And we could discuss that further after, commissioners get a chance to think more about that at the next meeting. So there's plenty of time before we have to kind of pull that together for the public hearing. But I would like to have something like that sort of finalized for your hearing, for your public hearing. So prior to that, when we get it out to the public, because I think it's a great point, Commissioner Brown, that it does need to be, there's a lot of information here and it's confusing. And it's going to be confusing. The content is going to be confusing to most folks anyway, because most aren't versed in this type of language. That you have ordinance and code, which is all rezoning code, development code, things like that, that's already kind of confusing. And then you take it to this level with the shoreline, and it gets even more confusing. I mean, I get confused. Thankfully, we have Kim Mahoney on our staff to keep everything straight.
I guess I think that the commentary that would be provided along with the matrix may be as important as the matrix, and that is, what's a periodic update? Why are we changing this? How often do we do it? What's the process? What does it what does it mean to our citizens? What opportunity do they have to be heard on the subject if they want to be heard?
Another great point. So there would be a staff report that would accompany this once we get to that point for public hearing. So there will be a staff report that, that I would present to you and the public at that public hearing that would explain all of those things that that list that you just ran down.
I think the point you make, Tom, is the challenge of any city government trying to spur on civilian or civic involvement.
Mhm.
I mean, all of our meetings are open and they're published on the city's website, and you can see it rarely attended. And that's kind of seen across the board. Every once in a while, there'll be a really hot topic and city council meetings will get going. So I will at times put out on social media like Nextdoor, say, talking about what's going on in the planning commission and inviting feedback, and have never actually received any. But directing people to where they can go and saying that, there's a public comment period, on certain things. But yeah, it's a real challenge. And it's an important point though.
Yeah, it is. And we do send out, notices all the time to the folks that we have. And I'm sure that most of you get those notices whenever there's a notice of application or decision or notice of public hearing and things like that. I don't think, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we send out any kind of a notice though for just regular planning commission meetings or anything like that, do we?
Regular planning commission meetings, no.
Right. Yeah.
They're just on the calendar.
It's just on the calendar. So that's a good point. So somebody who is interested would have to do a little bit more work or would have to be a little bit in the know about these meetings in particular. And it's not just the planning commission. I don't think we do that, for arts commission or for any of the other commissions, unless it's a special meeting or an actual public hearing where we're soliciting comment from the public. But I don't know, it's a good point. And maybe it's something that the city should look at changing to try and get more participation. Just, at this regular level. I mean, at this meeting tonight, we're not taking public comment on the subject, but it would still be good for people to listen in.
Okay, are there other comments? I would just echo the comment that I like the way that you presented things here tonight. It synthesizes things and, saves certainly all of us a tremendous amount of time trying to dig through, and even electronically thumbing through a 300-page document is not a lot of fun.
No, it's not. I agree. Okay, well, that's how I'll bring it back next time then with those other amendments. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, great job, Carl. I know there's a lot of work that goes into that 55-minute presentation, and so we appreciate it, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to give feedback on it as well.
Yeah.
So next item on the agenda is other business. Our next meeting is on the 15th of July. I will not be able to attend that meeting, Michelle. So hopefully John, as the vice chair, will be in attendance and will run the meeting.
Yeah, I will be available that day.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other business?
Yeah, I am wondering whether there exists somewhere a kind of a schedule of all of the periodic updates that we are required to do, or a list or some compilation of all of the periodic updates and when they are due. And
And Commissioner Brown, you're speaking of periodic updates relative to not only the SMP, I presume, then you're talking about the comprehensive plan, potentially the
Yes.
critical areas ordinance and things like that.
yes,
Okay, well, we can certainly get you,
transportation.
we can get you that information and put it into a table and send it out to the commission.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, barring no other business, then I am willing to entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And the second,
Second?
moved by Brown, second by Krasik. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. So I will call the Planning Commission meeting to close at 6:14 PM. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you in about 4 weeks, I guess. Do good